Now, on the Georgia vote, sports gambling remains illegal in Georgia.
We are so excited that you're in Atlanta.
But this week, Governor Brian Kemp helped open an Atlanta headquarters for a popular sports app. We'll look at the odds lawmakers finally allow it on the books.
Also,
I think that's also going to be top of mind of legislators as we come back.
we sit down with State Senate Republican leader John F. Kennedy about what he sees on the docket for the next legislative session.
And we bring in Republican political consultant Spiro Amburn and Democratic strategist Howard Franklin for our Politics Roundtable.
All right now on the Georgia Vote.
From the 11 Alive studios, this is the Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Hey, welcome into the Georgia Vote. Well, 4 weeks from now, a new legislative session kicks off under the Gold Dome, and it's safe to say there will be plenty of items on the House and Senate agendas before Sine Die comes on April 3rd.
Now, we have got an interview with a powerful Republican leader in the state Senate that is looking ahead to the session in just a few minutes. But first, we start this morning with a polarizing issue that may eventually cash in or go bust. We are talking about sports betting here. So let's set the table first. In 2018, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a federal law that barred betting on football, basketball, baseball, and other sports in most states. Since then, 38 states and the District of Columbia moved to allow some form of sports betting. And earlier this month, voters narrowly approved a sports betting measure in Missouri, very narrowly, by 0.05%. That state plans to launch sports betting by late spring or early summer. But here in Georgia, sports gambling technically still illegal.
That's right, Zach. But this week, Governor Brian Kemp, he helped to open the Atlanta headquarters for a company that comes very close to offering betting on sports. Doug Richards with the 11 Alive political team explains.
This was a ceremony to mark the expansion in Georgia of a company called Prize Picks, which lets folks wager electronically on the performances of individual players in team sports. The CEO for Prize Picks says expansion will create 1,000 new jobs. Although sports betting is technically illegal in Georgia, Prize Picks says its platform legally bypasses those prohibitions.
Well, it's a skill-based game.
Backers of sports gambling have spent years trying to coax the legislature to legalize it in Georgia. They say the state could tax the proceeds and use the money to expand college scholarships and other popular programs. Though Governor Kemp was the guest of honor at the Prize Picks ribbon cutting, Kemp has neither pushed nor blocked efforts to legalize sports gambling.
My whole thing is if they're going to do something like that, we need to make sure it does not cannibalize the lottery and hope scholarship.
Religious conservatives have led the effort to stop legalized sports gambling in Georgia. They've also helped Kemp win 2 terms as governor.
Doug Richards, 11 Alive News.
Prize Picks promotes itself as a daily fantasy game instead of a gambling site and operates a game here in Georgia. Well, earlier this year, lawmakers, they paused the most recent attempt to legalize sports betting in Georgia because of unsettled debate over how to divide tax revenue.
Well, meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, Georgia lawmakers continue to grill post office leadership as mail delivery delays persist. On Tuesday, it was Republican Congressman Rich McCormick's turn to take Postmaster General Louis DeJoy to task in a hearing that got pretty animated.
You, sir, do not get an A grade. You cannot give yourself that grade.
I just did.
You can't. You can't
did.
grade your own paper, sir. I've been to medical school.
Well, then,
I got my MBA. You can't. I'm sorry. You are graded by the United States people, and they don't use your service anymore. You bankrupt.
That is not true.
You bankrupt this through your reputation only. Through your reputation, you are responsible for the fall of the Postal Service and the lack of accountability.
Congress is responsible for the fall of the Postal Service.
So it's Congress.
I am trying to fix
on your
the Postal
watch,
Service.
With all the AI.
Before my watch, the same stuff happened.
With all the AI, with all the computer systems, you're worse than if I took a horse and picked up the mail and delivered it 2 miles down the road. That's you. I hope you got that on camera. This is the response that the Postmaster just gave Congress when he doesn't like what he hears. Literally covered his ears and gave himself the grade of A.
Well, criticism of the Postal Service reaches across party lines. Representative McCormick, a Republican, and Democrats like Senator John Ossoff have criticized DeJoy's leadership. He promised to save the USPS money and make mail delivery more efficient. Ossoff presented numbers this week showing only 75% of mail is being delivered on time in Metro Atlanta and North Georgia. And coming up Thursday on 11 Alive News at 6, we are diving deeper into why Georgia delivery rates still have not fully recovered and talking one-on-one with Congressman Andrew Clyde about whether Congress can take any further action.
Well, the state's election chief says the way Georgia handles its election should be a model for the entire country. And he says a new survey from UGA is serving as proof. So the post-election survey from UGA researchers found more than 90% of voters trusted the integrity of this process. Well, this week we spoke with the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. He says that the results show Georgia didn't need to make last-minute changes to its election laws, changes the state election board tried to implement leading up to November.
If you actually do those last rule changes, President Trump won big in Georgia. You actually would have diminished his victory. But they said, oh, he won because of this last-minute rule change. We stopped that in its tracks before it could even get out of the barn.
So with the 2025 legislative session less than a month away, Raffensperger says the survey results don't support the need for drastic election changes here in Georgia.
Well, right now, Fulton County Sheriff Pat Labatt faces a federal lawsuit for the conditions at the Fulton County Jail. This comes after a U.S. Justice Department report on the jail released earlier this year found the facility's conditions are, quote, inhumane, violent, and hazardous, end quote, and that those conditions violate constitutional protections. The lawsuit looks to force changes at the facility, seeking injunctive relief instead of financial damages. So what does that mean? It means that if the plaintiffs prevail, a judge could issue a mandate requiring the jail to address problems such as unsanitary conditions, broken locks, and security issues. Sheriff Labatt has repeatedly called for the jail to be replaced. Meanwhile, the sheriff's office has not commented on the lawsuit, but it confirms it has not yet been served. The lawmakers gearing up to return to the Capitol in just a few weeks. Next, we sit down with a top Republican leader to discuss his legislative priorities in the new year.
And later, our voice of the voter is all about harmony. Hear how she is helping Metro Atlanta's Latin American children through the power of music.
Well, he is a powerful leader in the state Republican caucus, and he is gearing up for a big legislative session. In this week's Sunday Conversation, we sit down with the Republican leader in the Georgia State Senate, President Pro Tem John Kennedy. A new legislative session is just about a month away. When you look ahead to it, what are your top priorities?
You know, the one thing that I think is going to be the most pressing issue as we all return back to the Gold Dome, we'll come back on January 13, is what do we do about hurricane relief for the victims of the communities and the families of Hurricane Helene? I have been down there multiple times, and I've seen the devastation firsthand. And it is a generational devastation on families and communities. And the truth is, if the state doesn't step in and we don't provide some help and relief to those communities, you're going to have whole small communities that are simply not going to survive.
So hurricane relief seems to be at the top of your list. What else is on your to-do list?
So, one of the things we're going to work on and continue with the governor's leadership is continued tax relief for hardworking Georgians and families. We have worked hard on that with the governor's leadership, but also we've led in the Senate. And and was very pleased to see the governors and was happy to be at the announcement where the governor is going to plan to rebate tax income rebates of $1 billion in this next year, 2025 session.
I want to talk to you about one issue that we've heard from voters and viewers a lot about, school safety. You know, Appalachia High School suffered a terrible, deadly school shooting earlier this year. The new legislative session is coming up. How do you intend to address school safety in that session?
Good question. I will tell you, I think that's also going to be top of mind of legislators as we come back. It's a horrible circumstance that we have all too often seen on the news, but it got visited here in Georgia in a very tragic way. And so I think what you will see is a continuation of the efforts to try to make sure that schools have the resources they need so that the children and parents, when they drop their children off, they know they're dropping their child off in a safe environment. We've been doing some things along those lines and just in the past 2 years with additional resources. Right now, based on the budgeting and appropriations that we've had over the last year or two, each school has been given about $45,000 for them to spend. That's just in the last 18 months or so, and that continues in the future to decide how they need to implement school systems, whether it is additional safety resource officers or whether it's metal detectors. And I think, quite frankly, we need to look at maybe that number needs to be higher, and it's going to be a continued discussion. A couple of ideas that are coming forward that I think, some of which are very appealing, and that is the, I'm going to call them emergency badges or emergency buttons, where the school teachers and the personnel have a badge that we have similar to here, that they can press a button in the event of an emergency.
Effectively a panic button.
Exactly, and it is extremely effective and improves the resource and response time of first respondents coming in. And in fact, what happened at the school here in Georgia that was so tragic, fortunately, literally I think it was 1 week before, those panic button mechanisms had been deployed and facilitated there at the school. And I think that I understand from the school system and the first responders and the police, they're saying that greatly aided the folks being able to come in and contain that situation perhaps more quickly than they would have without. So,
and they had school resource officers there on campus as well.
Yes.
Do you wonder, though, we've been asked this as well, do you wonder, yes, panic buttons help, having a school resource officer or multiple SROs on campus helps, as was the case at Appalachia. They had these resources, and still a terrible shooting happens. Are these ideas enough, or does more need to be done?
I think we need to be completely eyes wide open to seeing what can we do. And I promise you, we will be on the Senate side, as I think all legislators will be, interested in all ideas that may come forward. As I said a moment ago, nothing is more important than making sure our children have a safe school environment. The truth is, when parents drop their kids off at school today, it's a different environment and circumstance than when I drop my kids off at school every day. As we were talking earlier, my children are 28 and 26, and it's a different world. And we have to recognize that and be open to whatever ideas we can to make sure that we have a safe school environment and help the schools make those good, prudent decisions for what they need.
And that was just part of our conversation. You can hear Senator Kennedy's views on a potential bill to ban transgender girls from women's sports in Georgia, and how he's thinking about using the state's multi-billion-dollar budget surplus. That is all in our nearly 30-minute conversation. It is streaming right now on 11 Alive Plus, on Roku, Apple TV, or wherever you stream. Well, still ahead, we hear from the voice of the voter. But first, our political experts, Howard Franklin and Spiro Amburn, break down the week that was.
Time now for our politics roundtable. Today, we welcome back Democratic strategist Howard Franklin. He's worked on campaigns throughout the Southeast, including the 2021 campaign for Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens. He now leads the consulting firm Ohio River South. And Spiro Amburn, Senior Vice President at McGuire Woods Consulting. He's previously served as Chief of Staff for Georgia House Speakers John Burns and David Ralston. A little bit of sports. Whether you put your money on the Hawks, probably better off right now than the Falcons. You can't technically gamble on either of those teams. You can put your pick, though. You can put your prize pick. Do you think the opening of this new facility, this headquarters, could it potentially move the needle forward to legalize gambling here in Georgia?
Happy to take this first. I mean, I think part of the central argument for sports betting is the economic development opportunity and the interest, because so many Georgians are rabid sports fans who do want to wager on the games, who do have an affinity for the team. So I think there's a strong economic argument to be made, and I think the stars may align this year, the next year, 2025, for a real hearing on this issue.
How about you, Spiro?
First of all, go Dogs and Falcons and Hawks, too. Sports gambling has already taken place here. It has for a long time. This debate has raged on now for 7 or 8 years. But I do think the voters want to vote on this. On a Republican primary ballot just this last year, over 80% of voters said they would like to vote on this issue, not just sports betting, but destination resorts, gambling in general. So I do think the climate is right for the people to decide. There was a bill that passed the Senate last year, went over to the House, did not get a vote with the opening of the facility and the governor being there. I think there could be an opportunity.
But that's worth pausing on,
right?
Because both of you, you have different political perspectives, but both of you seem to be saying in one way or another, we've been talking about this for a long time, and a lot of people seem to like it, and yet it hasn't happened.
But what's ultimately happened in the last couple of sessions is that another issue would rear its ugly head and become the jockeying, the trading or the stalking horse as a legislative, effectively a negotiation took place. So it's less that there is an interest in both chambers and from both parties. It's that it seems to be such a priority that we'll only give you this if you give us that. And that's just how the General Assembly sometimes shows
As they say, the devil's in the details. It's all about where the money goes. The governor made the comment that he wanted to protect the lottery. I think that's 100% correct. But when you start talking about how to divvy up those extra funds and also the types of gaming, that's where things tend to get bogged down. So with the referendum that was on the ballot, if you put it out to the voters to decide whether or not you want gambling in general, which requires a constitutional amendment, then you can come back and decide, okay, what type of gaming do you want?
Maybe a good time to broaden our scope a little bit. You both are savvy experts and veterans of the Gold Dome. We're about to kick off a new legislative session in January. Just about 4 weeks away. It's coming fast. Besides sports gambling, Howard, let's start with you. What do you think are going to be some of the big talkers this year at the session?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things we're hearing from leaders of the majority party is how we're going to spend down some of this $16 billion budget surplus.
And that's a big surplus.
It's a huge surplus.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
It is, and there's also a little bit of consternation about some of the COVID relief dollars finally drying up. And so some of the local and state agencies that have benefited and been able to spend and do a lot of different things now are not quite as flush, and a lot of them have their hands out saying, hey, we want to continue to deliver on a high level of service, and we'd love to be able to use some of those dollars. There are a bunch of others there, but I think in the meat and potatoes, I think budget is going to be a bigger issue than it typically is in the session.
And Spiro, there's hurricane relief, there's school safety, farming. There's a lot of things that could be tackled.
Transportation. The list goes on. Healthcare. I agree in regard to those surplus dollars. Additionally, tort reform, I think, is going to be back on the table. There were a small bite at the apple last session, but the governor's made that a priority for this year. So that's an issue to watch. Also, public safety, the Department of Corrections, and the issues with the prison system, I think, will be at the forefront as well.
And you guys, as we take a look back, we have about 90 seconds here of 2024. We had a lot of political headlines. January, historic Iowa caucus for Trump. February, explosive testimony from District Attorney Fani Willis, all the way to June when Zach and I were both there at that CNN debate. What were some of the biggest stories that stood out for you this year?
I'll go first again. I'll just say one of the things I'm reading a lot about is just how much the last year has kind of reset everyone's political calculus, how we communicate in the political space, what sort of expectations we have for new norms. Obviously, President number 47, Congress 119. I think a lot of norms went out the window in 2024, and I think we may have a new set of norms forming in next year and beyond.
Spiro?
I don't disagree with that at all. I think there's always two sides to the coin. The other side is the more things change, the more they stay the same. It's all about being safe and all about having a good job. And I think that's what you saw in this election.
And you both have been along for the journey with us for the duration of this show. We've got about 30 seconds left. We're going into the holidays. What's on your mind as you get to this moment of gratitude, Howard?
Oh, man, so much. I'm glad that we're sitting here and going to wrap up how 2024 ultimately shook out and what to expect for 2025. I think Spiro's right. A lot of what the last year was really the battles were drawn around the right to the American dream, and I think being able to pursue it in a state like Georgia, that's a wonderful place to live. Has been wonderful.
And Spiro, last sentence to you.
Hopefully we could collectively exhale not just the last year, but the last 4 years have been very volatile. So hopefully, even with a president that we've already had, we can all kind of learn to come together and agree on whatever we can agree on.
We are absolutely hopeful, and we are so grateful for you two. We are out of time right now, but after the break, we want you to hear how today's Voice of the Voter is helping the next generation find its inner voice through the magic of music.
Well, with the new presidential administration on the way, many people are looking ahead to how it might impact them. And we here at the Georgia Vote remain committed to hearing from all of you as you head into a new political moment. After all, you can't have the Georgia Vote without Georgia voters. Now, this week, we met up with Juana Alzaga at the Latin American Association. She is the founder of the Buford Highway Orchestra Project. It provides music opportunities to kids of mostly immigrant families.
Our community, most of them don't have the credit nor the means to even rent an instrument, let alone private lessons. So I started this project during the middle of COVID.
The project is called Buford Highway Orchestra Project.
Correct.
Who is involved in this? How do kids get into it?
Must be in public school, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. They have to qualify for free or reduced lunch.
So this is a program for kids who otherwise probably wouldn't have a chance to play in an orchestra.
Absolutely.
When you look out at a room full of kids in this orchestra, what does that do to your heart?
Tears to my heart. I'm not only teaching music to these children, I'm opening doors to education.
When you went to cast your ballot in November, what were you thinking about?
I was thinking about saving and continuing this wonderful experiment called democracy.
What's the biggest issue you hope political leaders tackle in the new year?
So my biggest thing is, global warming, being part of NATO, which is, it's an alliance, right? So we're not an island. No man is an island. And we must engage in collaborations to preserve our democracy, and of course immigration.
If you had to pick just one as your very top, most important issue, would it be immigration reform?
Absolutely, no doubt.
A path to citizenship.
A path to citizenship, and many times I am the voice of many that cannot speak, that are voiceless. And when I see what they have to do on a day-to-day, the struggles, like many other minority communities, I have respect, the highest respect for them.
We always end with this. What are you optimistic about?
It's not only my community, but I think institutions like ACLU, human rights commissions, are going to stand up. Because it is our democracy. It is the United States. It's we who makes this great country. There's nothing to be fixed. This is already a great country.
And remember, you can see that story and a whole lot more from today's episode of the Georgia Vote on our streaming app, 11 Alive Plus. Those kids were really good with those instruments.
I loved it. I'm gonna go watch it.
Do you play instruments?
I did.
I should have asked. Now you're going to make me look bad. We can have our performance later.
We will. Well, thank you all so much for watching us today. We hope to see you back here next Sunday at 11 for another edition of the Georgia Vote.